in your early, your adolescent years, your early adult years, one of the things that you do is you detach from
Yeah.
relationships. You detach from your parents, you detach from things you don't like. And detachment will work okay at 15 or 16. That's not going to work at 25 or 26. And you got to think about that. Why am I detaching and what happens? And maybe it's a great strategy at 15. Maybe we have to learn to slowly pull away from our parents. But you try that detachment in the work setting or in a marriage, you've got some big problems coming.
This is Find Joy with Joyan Season 2, where joy gets stronger, our community gets bigger, and together we become better versions of ourselves in a world full of limitless possibilities. I'm your host, Joyan Chan. And every Wednesday, we bring you inspiring stories that will light up your soul, powerful message that will make you go wow, and fun conversations that will crack you up. With me and my special guests and friends, it is my personal mission to empower you to live and lead a life with joy. If you are new here, this podcast is for you if you are looking for more joy, courage, passion, and purpose in your life. We dive deep into mindset mastery, spirituality, love and relationship matters, and how to manifest more success and abundance in all aspects of your life, however that looks. This podcast has got your back every step of the way. Now, without further ado, get ready to laugh, learn, and live your life to the fullest. Without a solid foundation of theory, most people approach the world on a trial and error basis. However, theory alone can be meaningless as the connection to everyday issues needs to be improved. Our guest today holds a PhD where his studies focus on organizational and interpersonal communication. He has held the rank of professor and dean in a university setting, and his work experience includes serving as the CEO of behavioral health organizations, a consultant, and an advisor to the World Health Organization. He's here today to bring the practical and theoretical together so you can develop your superpower of becoming a critical thinker. So guys, help me in welcoming the author of Own Becoming a Critical Thinker, Awakening Your Business Superpower, Chetro Szivos. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Joanne. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing your book. I enjoy reading it. I'm learning so much from you. So how do you define critical thinking, and why do you think it's essential in today's world?
Well, here's one of the things, and then I go back to what kind of made me write this book.
Yeah.
Is it working in higher education for many years? A couple things come to mind for me. One is that every college catalog says the student will be a critical thinker at the end, and every syllabi from every course seems to say, critical thinking, show critical thinking. But I don't hear many conversations defining what it actually is. And I'm not sure students accomplish that. Some do. They kind of figure it out on their own, but I think we could all be better. Now, what was really interesting about that was a few years ago, I was looking and updating our curriculum, and I started to interview CEOs and business leaders in my geographic area. And one of the things that came up to me is that, don't bother teaching these students the technical skills. Those change, and we can cover that. But what we don't know how to do is to teach them the soft skills. And among that is how to think critically, how to anticipate, analyze, get along with others, have a self-development plan, and all those things are wrapped into that. So, most definitions of critical thinking, if you look it up, are going to be about analyzing and evaluating and choosing. I think it's more than that. I think it's also about um, what's the consequence of what I do and what I say, not only in my work, but with others, and how I put my life and my world together. So those two things kind of inspired me that there's a need for this. And I think I'm kind of semi-retired now while I had some time. I wanted to do that. In fact, I'm going to work on another book called Speak Like a Leader, which I'm working on now about managers and what are some ways you can use communication to be much more effective.
Well, I love that. I would love to have you back on the show when you have your second book out. But let's focus on the first one. So
Well, that's right.
what is the process of developing because like I said, not everyone is able to think critically because it's not something that we're taught in school, right? So how do we develop the process of thinking, becoming a critical thinker?
I think a lot of it is, first of all, it's certainly an issue of maturation, and that our brain is really not done until somewhere in the mid 20s, and for some of us, early 30s, some of us maybe never. Um, but I think the whole idea, and I really approach the book. In fact, if you notice that chapter on transformation, and I really think to become a critical thinker, we have to transform the self, which means we're going to be very different people. I think, um, when I would undertake a degree or a course, I'd wind up at the end in a very different place than I ever anticipated. And it was really effective when I became a different kind of thinker. Um, that I knew something, I got a new perspective that I never had before. And I think that critical thinking is about this process of transformation, which means it takes practice and it takes dedication. And there has to be a true desire to really want to be a better thinker and not just shoot from the hip. So many of us do that so quickly. One of the things I like to always tell managers, and I learned this when I was a young manager, is time is on your side. We don't have to react right away. It's a great point when you have the time, and most of the time we do. Let's say it's an employee issue. An employee's done something you didn't like. Well, I found this, when I was a young manager, I used to react right away and tell them, you can't do that.
Mm.
Um, and then I started to pull the employee aside and said, something went wrong today. You and I both need some time to think about it. Let's meet tomorrow and talk about how could it be differently. What I found with that is the employee, I would say 80, maybe 90% of the time would come back and say, I thought it over and this is what went wrong. I also calmed down and I wasn't working from, that kind of anger or frustration or disappointment. And I started to think, well, there are other things at hand here and I have to hear their side of the story. So that, is not only thinking smart and using time, it's also being empathetic and sympathetic towards other and having some compassion. And let's make the right decision. And we're human. We're always going to make mistakes. And let's move on from that and learn.
Yeah, I love that. So what if time is not on our side? Let's say if we have to make a decision right away, like right now, because it's
Sometimes we
an
do.
emergency, right, in the workplace. How do we approach that?
Yeah, that's much, much more challenging, I think. And sometimes we don't have the luxury of time.
Yeah.
In particularly certain jobs, you could imagine a police officer, an emergency room physician or nurse, they don't get the kind of time that most of us do in professional jobs. I think that's when all I can think back to is the Army does an interesting thing with their Rangers and Special Forces. They train them and train them and train them and train them. They're learning and they're thinking and they're able to assess quickly when they have to, that they have to be prepared. It's life or death for them.
Mm.
And it means they really have to know that. Now, one of the things that I always tell managers is you got to have a self-development plan. You have to know your weaknesses. You have to be able to like, how do I get stronger at that? But on top of that, you have to scan what's available. Like when I was managing, I made sure that if it wasn't every day, it was several times a week. I would read the Wall Street Journal. What were the trends? I'd read a newspaper of record like the New York Times. I would read my local paper too, and what's going on, and what are people in my industry doing that's different? What happens when people are in tough situations? They have to make a decision. You're not going to have every answer, but you certainly are going to have some thought going into it and thinking about it and an idea of what's going on out in the world where people are doing things successfully. So it just might work for you.
Yeah, okay. And in chapter one, you talk about something that grabs my attention. You talk about the seven types of knowledge. Do you remember what are the seven types of knowledge? Perhaps you can share with us now.
Yeah, well, let me pull it up because that's not my idea. That's John
Right.
Dewey, the great American philosopher. One of them, which we do, is the stream of consciousness thinking all the time. And that's where we live the majority of time. I think I give an example in the book. driving by a house and it's you remember, oh, I played there when I was a little kid. I wonder whatever happened to my friend. Um, and then that jumps off to my friend. You remember a birthday party? Oh no, it's my brother's birthday. I got to
Right.
get him something. What did he give me last time? But then we have this other knowledge. We have the tacit knowledge. It's hard to explain. We get a gut feeling about a person, and that's legitimate, and we act on that a lot. And sometimes I'm particularly interested in a lot of things going on in interpersonal neurobiology. And if we look at the polyvagal theory, is that vagus nerve that actually goes to our gut is another way that we make sense of things. Then we have explicit knowledge. It's frequently asked questions on a web page, it's instructions, it's a diagram, or implicit knowledge. But implicit knowledge is things we learn. Like I always think of driving a car. You need a new car, you go to the dealer or used car lot. They put you in front of the car. You don't need to read the whole manual. You've driven cars before. Sure, a few things may be different. Knobs may be in different places, but we kind of know how to do it. And then we have the posteriori knowledge, which is, it's subjective knowledge is gained from our experiences. You take a physician who's treated a condition many times. They have a much greater advantage over a younger practitioner who has not seen that. And then with the a priori knowledge, which is the athlete in one sport can begin to excel in another. They have athletic ability, great eye-hand coordination. Of course, we have the procedural knowledge, and I think this sometimes is automatic thinking, which I talk about, how to tie a shoelace, ride a bike, drive a car. We don't need to think about it.
Yeah.
And then lastly is the declarative knowledge. Um, we really know, I think it's critically important to know our company's goals for the year. One that I'm always kind of saddened by is that people put a lot of time into writing the mission statement or vision statement, and some even go as far as to do the core values. But they do a great job, and they put it in a file folder and they file it away.
Yeah.
Um, if that's what should be driving us, that everyone should know that. I worked at a university 2 jobs ago, and they had a great tagline. It was to challenge convention and change the world. And everybody knew it. Students knew it, faculty knew it, the staff knew it. And you would hear that in their speech. Well, we're challenging convention right now. We're changing at least our world. Um, and I always respected that. We kind of knew what we were about and the importance of doing that. So I think that's part of we have all kinds of knowledge. And unfortunately, most of us live in that stream of consciousness, which I'll admit is fun. And that's that monkey mind we
Yeah.
have when we jump from one thing to the other. But when we want to be critical thinkers, we have to rein it in somewhat and kind of take a look at stepping back and what's this about and how do I do it better?
Yeah, I think I hear you. Yeah, it's about also developing the self-awareness, right? Being aware of your own thoughts and so how do we? I know this is one of the concepts that you talk about as well is how do we become more familiar with how we think, our ways of thinking? Because I believe just based on what you shared, the 7 types of knowledge, I believe everyone thinks differently, right? So how do we become more familiar with our ways of thinking so that we can improve and become a better thinker?
Well, here's one of the things I talk about in the book, and I spend a lot of time on two things. One is what's automatic thinking and what's intentional thought.
Mm.
And then the other one that I'm kind of fascinated with, and um, years ago when I was doing an MBA degree, I couldn't figure this out. I did one of these executive programs on weekends. I would go off and I'd read these textbooks, and the problems would always neatly fit into the textbook, and they'd solve it and walk away, and everybody was happy. Well, I'd go back to work on Monday, and it didn't work. And I realized that I came across the work of Ronald Heifetz, and I found this really interesting, is that sometimes what we're faced with is a technical problem. So a technical problem, it could be building a house, writing a job description, how to change a flat tire. We kind of know the outcome, we know the steps, and I think that's what many textbooks showed us. But on the other hand, most of what I dealt with at work, and I'm sure managers listening to this, I hopefully would agree, are adaptive problems. I don't know the solution. I'm not sure. It's not certain what will happen. So when we really got to change our perspective. We've got to look at other answers. You look at things like climate change or racism. There's no simple answer. you make it more of a micro issue, a conflict in a team. How do you resolve that? That's an adaptive problem, and that requires a different way of thinking. And it tends to be more intentional in our thinking and looking what are the resources that can serve this, and then really knowing the context and knowing the people there. That becomes really important. And I think, I always think back without the time to think and to reflect. I think of a Shakespearean play when I was an undergrad. That's the what happened to Macbeth. If you watch that play, he's never alone. There's always someone on the stage with him. He never gets the time to think. And I think that's just like the manager's job so often is that they got to build that time to think. And I'm sure they do. Managers out there, the idea that it's an 8 hour a day job is a silly one that, they take it home, they think about it when they're in the shower, they think about it on their drive. How do I solve this? And I think learning to be more efficient with your thinking can really help you. And that's part of becoming a critical thinker.
Right. So, in fact, a lot of my listeners, I would say they are business owners and entrepreneurs. And the thing is, like you said, right, perfectly, is that we don't really know the answer, right? We don't really have the solution when we face a challenge or problem, especially in the context of business. So, what are some of the things that you talk about in the book that could help apply in the business world and help entrepreneurs out there?
I really think it's having a self-development plan and really knowing where do I need to get better. Years ago, well, not that long ago, I was directing 3 graduate programs and I had program directors. And one of the things I did with them is we started to dabble in something called the deliberately developmental organization. And what we did is we were very public with what are the things I need to work on in their language, they call it an edge. What am I trying to change? And we made that public. We knew each other's, and then we dedicated ourselves that year, and our meetings would start with that. And then anytime we saw it, um, I remember one person's edge was they tended to get over involved in things that took on all the problems that everybody had and it was taking away from their work. And when we saw her doing that, we would say, "You're doing it again." How can I help you to support you to get back on track? Mine was, and we did it for about a year. Mine was integrity, that I felt that everything I had to do had to have integrity and had to be ethically based. So at the time when I was dealing with students or policies on students or policies of the administration, it was really important to stay on focus with integrity, not to take the shortcut. But what happened was I found out in part of the theory of a DDO, the deliberately developmental organization, is we all have an immunity to change. There's something that holds us back. It's probably an assumption of some kind. That it could be, what are my assumptions? What are my beliefs? How should work go? I find it really interesting that, we've all sat through orientations at a job and they're great for telling us the policies and the mission statement and that type of thing, but they never tell us the unwritten rules, what ought to happen here. And think about starting a new job. It's never the fear, can I do the job? What feels awkward is, well, where do I hang my coat? Phone calls.
Yeah.
Do we eat lunch together? That's finding the ought, what ought to happen. And I think that's an important place to define and to start and to know the ought and to articulate it to people that come in. We don't have social relationships here. We do have social relationships. We do have lunch. We don't have lunch. We don't challenge this person. We do that. And I think getting deeper into that all the time is really important. And it just takes the rules and norms of the organization, makes them more public. And then we kind of know what it is. And on top of that, people can kind of figure, do I fit in this culture? Which is a really important question. That any talented manager will find out getting another job. And sometimes it's just not a good fit with us and the job. And that's okay. We have to try. We have a responsibility to try. But we just don't know. You start a new job, you do a couple interviews, and what do you know? You're an entrepreneur, you're starting a company. You have a great opportunity to think, what ought to happen here? How do I want people to work? And defining it becomes critical for everyone.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that I want to talk to you about is also from your book, is the concept of metacognition. Um, what can you explain to us the concept of metaconnection and what does it mean?
Well, metacognition is it's thinking about our thinking.
Okay.
And I don't think we spend enough time doing that. Um, when first of all, we have to become familiar with our ways of thinking. In fact, I still teach a course that I was teaching this morning to some students, and I was talking about in your early, your adolescent years, your early adult years, one of the things that you do is you detach from
Yeah.
relationships. You detach from your parents, you detach from things you don't like. And detachment will work okay at 15 or 16. That's not going to work at 25 or 26. And you got to think about that. Why am I detaching and what happens? And maybe it's a great strategy at 15. Maybe we have to learn to slowly pull away from our parents. But you try that detachment in the work setting or in a marriage, you've got some big problems coming. And I think it's important to know, how do I think and how do I act? And I is a mentor of mine, Barnett Pierce, had a book called Making Social Worlds. And he has four questions. I call them the two W's, two H's. That's how I always remember them. Is it first of all, I think it's important to ask with another person or even of ourselves is, what am I making or what are we making in our relationship? What am I making in my work? How am I making it? Um, am I going off to work engaged and inspired, or am I going off to work feeling this is meaningless and it's not me? And what am I becoming in that process? And then last is, how do I do this better? So that is really stepping back and thinking about my thinking and my action. And you could do that individually or, your relationship with another. And those four questions they're critical questions that we should always be asking and learning and seeing and what's that, what we are doing and who we are becoming. I think those are so important.
And so what else, what are some of the other practical tools or I would say habits of mind that can enhance our critical thinking skills that you can share with us, whether, it could be, I don't know, reading more books, reading every day, right? Or journaling or even meditation. What would you recommend?
Here's the things I like. I mean, I really think that, at no time in history we've ever had so much information available to us. Well, let me go back. So much data available to us. It's our job to turn it into information.
Mm,
And we, if you have a commute or you go to the gym or you go for a walk, great time to listen to a nonfiction book on some issue of management, or it doesn't have to be management. It could be philosophy. It could be psychology. So many great resources. There are courses online now through Coursera, Udemy, and hundreds of places where we could really get stronger. Always welcome to go back to school. Um, I think you brought up something there that I found really helpful for me, and I don't. It's not a woo-woo magic thing. Is mindfulness meditation is a key element, and we're seeing it growing everywhere. That people are starting to see that. Stop, think, live in this moment. If you failed in the past, put it away. There's this moment. Don't be paralyzed by the future. It's the here and the now. Um, I think embracing the complexity that our lives, this world around us, it's mysterious and it's very complex, and that's okay. And our job is to look at what are the best things I can do. Now, I think it means one of the things I find with critical thinkers, and certainly as I try to work at my own critical thinking, is I have to become excited about my day. I have to become engaged. And I have to look at each day like, what could I accomplish? What could I learn? Sure, there's the mundane. What do I have to make sure gets done? Um, and where do I put that in time? But what's my development plan? Do I take time to meditate? And it's funny, I'm not a hardcore meditator. I went through the mindfulness meditation program that John Kabat-Zinn did, and it's a phenomenal program, and it's online now too. Anyone can do it. And it doesn't mean you have to spend an hour every day on, the cushion and with your legs folded up. A simple 10 minutes a day. And I notice the days I miss, my temper's a little shorter, and
yeah.
it's like, oh boy, I need to get back to taking that deep breath and living in this moment. But to become a critical thinker, I think there's something really interesting. There's small practices. Read an email. What did I just send? What message was it? Is it clear? read the emails that come back to us. What does this person want and what goes on? Think of um, I think some compassion for others. It's really kind of funny. I think of yesterday was the great eclipse of 2024. I just happen to live on this hill and it has an incredible vista. And a couple of people drove up into my neighborhood to watch this eclipse. I invited him onto my lawn.
Wow.
Get a seat. Can I get you a bottle of water? Let's enjoy this. I made some new friends.
Incredible.
And this beautiful miracle going around us and being aware of that. And I saw it as a practice in critical thinking because sometimes I'm just not all that great at making connections. Well, yesterday I did a fine job. And so today, what do I do next to make that connection? There's something in the book that I absolutely love that's helped me a lot. And it's that I call it my dashboard that I construct. And I live by it, that this week, how much am I going to dedicate to fix up around the house or getting my yard ready for spring? How much family time will I have? How much reading? How much writing? I still have students. How much I make sure I respond to students every day. Am I getting 7 hours of sleep? Am I getting some exercise in? And I like to watch it. And I like to turn that data into information that, hey, I'm not doing so good on physical exercise. I need to concentrate on that next week. Or I'm not doing so good on writing. Um, I really need to get back to it. And I think that makes you a critical thinker. It's the beginning of it. It's that first step that engage with it, grab it, take it, and then also build in the time where you relax. I love afternoon naps. So I actually work them into some days. And then I have something, it's kind of funny. My whole neighborhood, everybody laughs about it. From 4:30 to about 5:30, I call it the gentleman's reading hour. Nonfiction. Women can come too. But it's a really important time of day. And, I read, whether it's about thinking or thought, or right now I'm doing a lot of work. I'm just kind of, last summer I was interested in learning more about quantum theory. And right now I'm learning about mythology. After I'm done with this, who knows where it'll take me? It'll take me someplace really kind of interesting that I could use. And so I think that is becoming a critical thinker. Those simple steps. I think any of us can become that.
Mm, yeah. I think to summarize, it's all about knowing who you are becoming, right? What kind of results do you want for yourself, and developing the plan, which is talk about, right? And also the last thing that you shared was measure the progress, right? Measure your own progress, and see where to improve and where do you need more time, to spend more time on, right? Am I-
Absolutely. I find for me, imagine driving a car without a dashboard.
Mm,
It won't tell you how much gas you have, how fast you're going, and now they tell you everything from time to weather to cars in front of you. But imagine going through your life without knowing what's happening. It's kind of, why do we do that? Why do we not see our progress? And where do we not see, hey, I'm not doing enough of this, or I want to dedicate myself to that? For me, it works. I'm not sure it works for everybody. It's just a suggestion that I have that I've seen it work for some, and others, I don't need that. And that's okay. That's totally okay.
mm. Yeah, awesome. So is there anything else that you really want to talk about? Perhaps I didn't ask you or didn't let you.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm just always fascinated about is the really critical importance of understanding communication. Um, and and I talk about it in the book. And first of all, I'm my PhD is in organizational communication, so I consider myself a communication scholar and a social scientist in some ways. Here's what I think about communication. We've done it to our general disservices. We think it's as simple as sending a message out there. Um, and yeah, that's okay, but we've got to remember it's much more impactful than that and much more complex. Look at the times, and I always use the example, you give someone a gift, you think they're going to love it, and they didn't. Well, interpretation is entered into it. It wasn't of value to them. We have histories with people we talk to. I think it's really important that managers learn more and more about the complexity of communication. That communication is what I call, or not I call, but many communication call a constitutive force. It makes us who we are. And think about what we do in the knowledge world. We're not farmers, we're not factory workers anymore. we sit in front of each other and we share communication and thoughts and ideas, and we really have to understand the impact of that communication. It is so critically important. Like, you look at communication, we have great devices. You and I are talking over Zoom, and then later this will go out over streaming. But people have been in the same conflicts and arguments since the beginning of time. We've not made progress with that because we don't understand the impact of our communication, and that what we have is what I call joint action, that it's an interdependence. You and I don't own a conversation. We share that. And what one does influences the next move. And that's true with our employees. It's true with our coworkers. It's true with our people above us. And we have to understand this is joint action. And how do I act and create or try to create the best consequence possible, and have that preferred future that I want? So I think, and in fact, that's why the next book is going to be about speaking like a leader. It's going to be there's things that managers are required to say. And then there's times they have to be very human in their communication with others. So I think it's a really important aspect of our being as people.
Yeah. And it's all about establishing the human connection as well. It's understanding humans' emotion, right? And feeling. So
Absolutely.
lastly, what is one tip that you can share with our listeners today? Because I totally agree with you. Communication is key to success as well in business. So what is one tip that you can share with my listeners that will improve their communication skills?
Hmm. Um, First of all, realizing I don't own the conversation, I share it. In that what I say, the next person has to act from that moment. There's another thing I think managers are very guilty of, and it's called conversational narcissism. And it's that I'm going to do the talking and you're going to listen. Well, okay, but that's true to a degree because there are some things that you have the authority to do, but we can't dominate the conversation. Here's another one of my things of higher ed. We want to improve the communication of students. So what do? We make them take a public speaking course. Why aren't they taking a public listening course? You know, it just, um, we I'm not sure we listen. And if you look at, there's something in about the American culture where we talk and talk and talk, but we don't do much listening. And we do all kinds of things without even realizing it. Like I think it's some work done by a sociologist, Charles Derber, talked about the shift in support response. Like if you said to me, gee, I'm not feeling great today. I didn't really sleep last night. Well, what response do I have? A shift response would be, not me, I'm doing great. Well, what do you say? Now, what would be a support response? Like, oh, what's happening? Is there, anything I can get you, any way I can help? That's a support response. We continue the conversation on
Yeah.
rather than shift it. And sometimes we don't do it as subtly. I mean, we do it much more subtly than that. Sometimes, somebody is excited. They say, hey, I just did this great thing. And all you say is, oh, yeah, that's disconfirmation. And it's really hard. But I think we have to be mindful of that when am I actually supporting the other speaker? When am I really listening? And when am I shifting the attention back to me? Um,
Mhm.
and it's really kind of an odd thing that we do it so often. And every time I have to teach that module, either doing a training or a class, it's like, oh God, I've been doing it again. It's just so hard to turn off.
Yeah. Yeah. Because some people they only want to talk about themselves like all the time. They don't listen. They just keep talking. They're the talker, right? It's not really a conversation. It's a one-way traffic, right? It's only one-way conversation. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of times it's been interesting because I am the manager, I get to do the talking.
Yeah.
You're missing the listening, and you're missing the critical, what I call bifurcation points, where the organization can change in really profound ways. You should listen to the employee. They have some ideas,
Yeah.
and they have some feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. Put your people first always. So thank you so much for coming. Now tell our listeners across the world. So tell them what is the best place to connect with you, learn more about you, and where do they buy your book?
Well, it's available on Amazon, I think Barnes and Noble as well, and some small local bookstores. It should be. In fact, I just got it today. I have to listen to it. It's going to be an Audible book as well. So I think I think that format might be easier for some. Um, I do have a website. It's just HTTPS. And all it is J Chetro, Chetro. And on there they can there's a few things, and I just started a website. I'm going to have much more on there. There's a couple of short videos. I also have a Facebook site and a LinkedIn as well. They could find me there. I do have a couple, this podcast and a few others will be going up on there as well. And there's more material to come. So if you're interested in this, it's another resource, and it's maybe, I'm not saying it's the best resource, but it's there. It's also I'm really been happy with the book on Goodreads. I think I have 30 reviews now, maybe 40. And it's averaging out of 5 a 4.97. So I guess it's a pretty decent book, if I say so. Well, the world speaking, they say so. So I'll take that.
It's a great book. Yeah. So guys, I'm telling you, it's a great book to learn. And there are many chapters, right? And I love the book because it's very short chapters. And because I'm someone who, I would say I consume book, on a, it's not like I read all at once. So I like shorter chapters because that's easier to consume. So I will put all the links and resources that we have for you today in the show note below. I will put all John's link in the show note, so you can just visit the show note and click on the link and connect with him. All right. Thank you so much for listening and watching us today. Remember to subscribe to this show so you'll never miss the next episode and be the first one to be notified when we release a new episode every Wednesday. Thanks for listening, and I wish you all a joyful and amazing day ahead. Bye, John. Thank you so much.
Goodbye, Joyan.
Thank you again for tuning into Find Joy Joyan podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, take a screenshot and share it on your IG story and tag _podcast so I know you are listening. And leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already done so. And remember to hit the subscribe button whether you are listening on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, or any of your other favorite platforms. If you love what we are doing and want to become one of our sponsors, you can send me a DM to connect. And thanks for being here. I will see you soon in the next episode.